Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Pagani Design PD-1723. This watch is available from Pagani Design AliExpress official store for €213. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the other items one gets with the piece. So the watch comes in a premium watch box, which is protected by this cardboard outer sleeve, which one removes. And this is the premium watch box itself. So new style of premium watch box. As you can see, it's navy blue and contrasting tan, stitched around the perimeter to a good standard, and vinyl coated. Now I prefer the vinyl coated black premium watch boxes to this new style, and I'll show you why. It has a spring-loaded hinge mechanism, and on this one it's failed. As you can see, the lid doesn't snap shut with a nice positive click. So that's a disappointment, and there's room for improvement with regards to the finishing of the interior. As you can see, the interior vinyl lining is already beginning to come loose. So it's really poorly finished, and I think Pagani Design should go back to using their black vinyl coated premium watch boxes, which were better quality. The watch sits on a padded pillow cushion in the base, as one would expect, and this is vinyl coated to an acceptable standard. So it's disappointing that the lining is coming apart, and it's also disappointing that the hinged spring-loaded mechanism has failed, because as you can see, the hinged lid is a sloppy fit to the base. It doesn't align correctly, and it also doesn't snap shut. So really it's an abhorrent watch box. I don't think it's worth paying the extra for this premium watch box. I think you should take the less expensive option of the standard cardboard watch box. With regards to the other items, this is the owner's instruction manual. Although basic, it does suffice in detailing the operation of the movement used, which is the PT-5000 automatic. Clear, concise diagrams, and the instructions are in English. One also gets this plastic guarantee card, and as usual the reverse isn't filled in. However, I'm pleased to report that 1733 is covered by the usual 12-month international guarantee. Now I've stuck on the protective film from the case back because this is the first time I've seen them use a hologram QC passed sticker, and it's clear that Pagani Design want to let the collector know that they are QC inspecting their watches. But looking at the poor quality bracelet on this 1723, I very much doubt the bracelet passed a QC inspection. Pagani Design need to understand that QC inspection doesn't just mean sticking a sticker on the case back protective film. One has to inspect the watch. So I think that these QC hologram stickers really are a marketing ploy rather than the watches actually being QC inspected. With the watch, one also gets this elasticated NATO strap, which makes a refreshing change from the usual default option of a nylon NATO strap. Stainless steel hardware throughout, brushed satin finish, no sharp edges to it. Sterile buckle and tang, which is also brushed satin finish. Cross-cutting measure of not laser etching Pagani Design's text logo. But having said that, the quality of the fabric is good, and it will fit up to an 8-inch wrist. Plenty of holes in the strap to allow for fine-tuning the length, and the end of the strap is welded to prevent fraying, so it's a good quality elasticated nylon NATO strap. One also gets this 1.6mm flathead screwdriver for resizing the bracelet. This is the plastic tag that comes to the watch. And lastly, one also gets this Pagani Design branded microfiber polishing cloth. I always think it's a nice touch to get a branded microfiber polishing cloth, irrespective of the price point of a piece. So, with regards to the specifications of the piece, this is the Pagani Design PD-1723. The watch is clearly an homage to a vintage Rolex Air King, so very similar proportions. We have a 37mm case diameter. Now I want to clarify something. There is an error on the AliExpress listings for this 1723. The case diameter on the AliExpress listings is stated as 36.2mm, but it isn't actually 36.2mm, it is 37mm. I have measured this case with my digital vernier caliper, as I do with all the watches I have reviewed. So 37mm case diameter in reality. We have a 44mm case diameter. We have a 12.4mm lug to lug measurement. The lug width is 20mm, and the oyster style bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to 16mm at the 2-button push flip lock clasp. The flip lock on the clasp is signed to a high standard with the Pagani Design shield engraved. I like this. I think that Pagani Design should implement this across all their watches in their collection. I think the engraved shield looks better than engraving the Pagani Design text logo longitudinally on the body of the clasp. But however, this pressed stainless steel clasp is a clear cost-cutting measure, and it is abhorrent. It is wholly unacceptable to use a pressed stainless steel clasp at this price point of €213. As always, I'm going to be critical of the clasp only having 3 micro adjustment holes rather than 4 or 5. They should have just used the flip-lock clasp used on the 1692, which is better quality. It's a Rolex flip-lock style clasp. But having said that, it is finished to an acceptable standard. Solid mil 316L grade stainless steel interior, brush satin finish to a high standard on the top side, underside and flanks. No sharp edges, no burrs. Now, it doesn't have any extension link as per the EasyLink style extension used on the 1692 clasp, so again, it would have been better had they just used the 1692 clasp rather than this abhorrent press metal cost-cutting measure clasp. But having said that, it does snap shut with a nice positive click, and there's a nice positive secondary click to the flip lock itself. With regards to the rest of the specification, we have a double domed boxed top hat style crystal with blue tinted AR coating on the underside. So I'm pleased to see Pagani Design introduce blue AR coating to this 1723. It's something they introduced on the 1733 Milgauss Homage and the 1692 Air King and Explorer Homages. But however, they've made a mistake in choosing blue tinted AR coating. They should have used clear AR coating. Using blue tinted AR coating really doesn't match the aesthetic of this being an homage to a vintage Air King piece. I think clear AR coating would have looked better. But having said that, the blue tinted AR coating does do a good job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature of the gilt applied indices, gilt applied Arabic numerals at 9, 6 and 3, the gilt applied shield and also the gilt dolphin style hands. The hands are mirror polished to a high standard and they are correctly proportioned. The hour hand is long enough to extend to the applied indices and also the Arabic numerals, and the minute hand is also correctly proportioned because the tip of the minute hand extends to the 60-minute ticks on the chapter ring. Often with low-tier Chinese watches, Pagani Design included, the proportions of the hour and minute hand are too short and undersized, and therefore they don't reach to the indices and also the minute ticks. But they've got the proportions of these dolphin hands correct. However, I think they've made a mistake with the contrasting green second hand. Yes, the contrasting green second hand looks right on a 1692 Air King homage, because that is an homage to the current Air King, which uses a green second hand. But this is an homage to a vintage Air King, and that didn't use a green second hand, it used a gilt second hand as per the hour and minute hand, so they should have used a gilt second hand, and I think that the contrasting second hand, although clearly legible, it doesn't fit the aesthetic of the piece. With regards to the applied shield, I think they've made the correct decision by using a gilt shield. It matches the applied indices and the Arabic numerals, and it's also mirror polished to a good standard. And I think the dial looks cleaner and better without the Pagani Design text logo printed on it. At the 6 o'clock position, we have just the right amount of information. PT 5000 and 200M equals 660 feet. However, if you look closely at the 200M, you can see they have made an error because they've used an uppercase italic M rather than using a lowercase italic m as per the FT in 660 feet. So I think they should have used a lowercase m because the large M really doesn't work with the lowercase FT in 660 feet. And there's room for improvement with it. Also, they should have just printed automatic. There's no need to print PT5000. For example, it wouldn't make sense to print NH35A or VH31 on their other watches. For continuity, they should just print automatic. PT5000 really is negligible, although I appreciate this is the first Pagani Design where they've used the PT5000 and they clearly want to advertise this as a selling point. With regards to the crown, it's solid 316L grade stainless steel, coin edge finished, embossed with the Pagani Design shield to a high standard. The shield is mirror polished with a matte speed blasted background, so I like the design of it. Screw down crown provides an effective hermetic seal to 200 meters, which is strong specification for a daily wear piece. One would expect this to have 100 meters of water resistance, so to get 200 meters on a piece which isn't a dive watch is very good. Now, it feels smooth, but there is firm resistance to the PT5000. It doesn't feel as silky smooth as an NH35A powered piece, and I personally prefer the execution of a 35A powered piece rather than the PT5000. unscrewing the crown does have more resistance, so that's something to note. In the first position, it's the manual wind position, and one can manually wind the PT5000 to top it up to its maximum 38-hour power reserve. Now, there's a lot more resistance in the PT5000 compared to the 35A. Personally, I prefer manually winding a 35A because it feels more silky smooth, less resistance in the mainspring. With a PT5000, one has to really turn the crown. There's a lot of resistance in it. It feels really taut. There's a lot of spring-loaded action, a lot of torsion in it. Not as pleasant to manually wind. Pulling it out to the first click position on the crown is the quick set date complication position. So the dates wheel is present on this PT5000 underneath the dial, despite the date window being present. It's deleted, so it does still click. One can feel the quick set complication of the date wheel clicking over. It does have a phantom date setting position. Pulling it out to the second click position is the time setting position, and one can hack the movement. If you look at the green second hand, you can see it's now stopped dead, so it's possible to hack the PT5000 to set the time precisely to the second. So we're now in the time setting position. The PT5000 has a firmer resistance to it. One can feel the friction of the winding gears. I prefer the feeling of setting the time on a 35A because that feels more silky smooth. Lighter resistance, less friction in the gearing, but on this PT5000 there is no back play clockwise and anti-clockwise. It does feel like a good tight movement, although the gearing, the winding gear, does have more resistance, and also in setting the time one can feel the resistance of the gearing. So it does take some getting used to if you're familiar with the 35A. The PT5000 does feel different as it's a clone of the 2824-2 and the SW200-1. It feels very similar resistance to those movements. Pushing it back in restarts the movement with a nice positive click, and the second hand begins to sweep around the dial once again. So let's test screwing it back down. Now, it doesn't have the immediate thread pickup of the 35A. One has to really push in the winding stem and crown into the movement in order to get the internal thread of the stainless steel crown to engage and pick up with the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. It's not as silky smooth as a 35A crown, and that's something to note. One has to really push it in and really give it a firm clockwise turn in order to get the threads to pick up, so not as good. I'll describe it as smooth, but just not as silky smooth, and a lot more resistance in it. Not as pleasant to use, although the execution of it is okay. So I'll show you the case back. Solid stainless steel case back, which provides an effective hermetic seal to 200 meters. I like the mirror polish centre section. Use of the Pagani design shield, text logo, and then we have the model number 1733, so that's good. I think they've made the correct decision by using the shield and model number rather than engraving or embossing an abhorrent design, which is irrelevant to this being an Air King homage. Also around the circumference we have concentric CNC lathe tool machining with the specification engraved to a good standard, and also PT5000 movements. Milled slots are well done, mirror polished circumference, and I like it. Now the benefit of using the PT5000 is it is a lower profile movement than the 35A, and therefore it means they can use a lower profile case back and still maintain 200 meters of resistance rather than 100 meters. So I like the flat low profile case back. It feels very comfortable against the wrist. And also the case is low profile. This is only 12.4 millimeters thick, including the double dome boxed top hat style crystal. Right, so I'll give you a wrist shot, and you can see how this fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now I haven't sized the bracelet. I've simply taken the watch out of the watch box, and this is on micro adjustment position 2 of 3. And as you can see, I can still easily fit an index finger underneath the bracelet and clasp, so this will fit up to an 8.5 inch wrist with no problems. Now, as it's a 37mm head of the piece with a short lug to lug measurement of 44 rather than the sweet spot of 48, this is clearly meant to suit collectors with a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches. If you're a collector with a 7 to 8 inch wrist, I think you will find this to be too small. But however, if you have a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches, you will enjoy the shorter 44mm lug to lug measurement, and you'll also enjoy the 37mm head of the piece. Correct proportions to the oyster style bracelet, 20 tapering down to 16 is the perfect taper on an oyster style bracelet, and the female pivoted end links give a good fit to the wrist because they pull down the end link in the oyster style bracelet rather than male end links, which would extend it to 46 or 48 millimeters effective lug to lug measurement. Now it's a deceptive piece because it's only 12.4 millimeters, even though it has a boxed top hat style double dome sapphire crystal. One would expect this to be 13 millimeters if it had a 35A. But the benefit of using the PT5000 is it means the case is lower profile, the case back is flatter, and therefore it's more snug to the wrist. So 12.4 means it will easily slip underneath a shirt cuff if you wear business shirts. Aesthetically pleasing, I like the use of the blue tinted AR coating because it means that it reduces the glare, and as you can see, the gilt applied indices and gilt Arabic numerals with the gilt dolphin hands contrast very well with a matte dial, and the green contrasting second hand also contrasts very well with a matte dial. So legibility is good, feel good factor is good, and also it feels very well balanced. It doesn't feel top heavy at only 129 grams. As you'll know from my previous reviews, I consider circa 150 grams to be the sweet spot for a feeling of comfort, but also a feeling of heft and wrist presence. 129 means that it's very lightweight and it feels very comfortable to wear for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. Right, so let's do a loom test and we'll see how the loom performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it's as one would expect. This is clearly C3 Luminova rather than using C3 Superluminova. It's weak performance. The loom isn't initially glowing brightly, and it's not going to glow for a good length of time. Now, as you can see, they have fully loomed the applied 9, 6 and 3 Arabic numerals, and they are glowing to an acceptable standard, but on the dolphin hands it has clearly 2 to 3 layers of C3 Luminova applied rather than 5 to 6 layers, so clear cost-cutting measure. So as you can see on the dolphin hands, it is immediately beginning to fade to nothing very quickly, so very disappointing. And now on the 9, 6 and 3 applied Arabic numerals, it's also beginning to fade. So very disappointing cost-cutting measure, and as always, I would prefer to see Pagani Design upgrade to using either BGW9 Superluminova or alternatively C3 Superluminova, because this is something that collectors would happily pay an additional €5 to €10 for on the retail price of a piece to get Superluminova, because as you can see, now the hands aren't legible whatsoever. We can still see the loom on the applied index at 12 o'clock, the triangle, but I think they should have fully loomed it rather than using the 3 triangles in the applied index. The 9, 6 and 3 are still visible, but really it's pointless using loom if the dolphin hands aren't visible because one cannot read the time in the dark on the hands. So very disappointing, and I would say that this is some of the worst performing loom I've seen on a Pagani Design watch. So clearly room for improvement. Right, so let's discuss the movement used. You'll all be familiar with the PT5000. So as discussed, this is the first Pagani Design, the 1733, to use the PT5000. Now, I think it's good that they've used the PT5000, and I hope that they use it in other watches. The PT5000 is a clone of the ETA 2824-2, so it has the same 25 joules. It runs at 28,800 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 4 Hz. One thing I like about 4 Hz movements is if you look closely at the second hand, you can see the second hand has a nice smooth sweep to it, which is a characteristic of 4 Hz movements. If this were powered by the 35A, which runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz, a 3 Hz movement means the second hand judders or stutters around the dial. With a 4 Hz movement, like this PT5000, you can see the sweeping second hand has a smoother sweep to it, as per the 2824-2 and the SW200-1 respectively. So I like the smooth sweep of a 4 Hz movement, and it means that the second hand is very aesthetically pleasing to look at. The PT5000 has hand winding and hacking, which use for complications, although the hand winding isn't pleasant to use, as I've discussed. The 35A is more pleasant and smoother to hand wind. 38 hours of power reserve is perfectly acceptable for a daily wear piece. The stated accuracy of the PT5000 is plus or minus 12 seconds per day. This one has been regulated to plus 8 seconds per day, which is within the plus or minus 12, and it is acceptable. Now, with regards to the PT5000, it is possible to regulate them to within chronometer limits of -4 to +6 seconds per day. So I would like to see Pagani Design improve on their regulation, because although +8 is acceptable, it's within ±12, they could go further. They could regulate their PT5000s to -4 to +6 and chronometer limits. So I think +8 is okay, but really there is room for improvement on it. So lastly, I'll summarise the piece. Now, the way I would describe this piece is the quality of the head of this piece is good. However, the main negative of this watch is the bracelet. This bracelet is one of the worst bracelets I have ever seen on a Pagani Design watch. If you look at the female pivoted end links, there is lateral side-to-side play, and there is also up and down play. There is play in the end link in every direction, and we're talking about 1 to 2 millimeters of play. It is absolutely dreadful. Just look at the longitudinal play there. 1 to 2 millimeters, and then we also have 1 to 2 millimeters. So the bracelet rattles, because also in the other pins in the bracelet we have 1 to 2 millimeters of play in every direction. It's just dreadful. There's also gaps in between the centre links and the outer links. They feel sloppy. So the cumulative effect of all this play in every direction is on wrist. The bracelet makes a loud audible rattling sound, and it also feels sloppy and loose. Now this is further compounded. I'll just show you on this side. The screw pin links with the removable 1.6mm screw pins kink. They're too tight. So the bracelet kinks, as you can see, and these screw pin links are too stiff. So it's neither one thing nor the other, because some of the links are too tight and they kink. They don't pull straight. One has to manually straighten them out. And then on the other links, near the end link, they are too loose. They're sloppy. So we've got tight links in the screw pins, which are too tight, and then we've got loose links on the end link end. And this is on both sides of the bracelet. This side is too loose, lots of play, and then the removable links kink. Now the problem is, on wrist one can feel the links kinking, and one has to keep manually pressing them to straighten them out. So this really is one of the worst bracelets I have ever seen on a Pagani Design watch. It's a mixture of loose, sloppy links that rattle and links that kink because they're too stiff. Just dreadful, and that's compounded by the abhorrent cost-cutting measure of using this pressed stainless steel clasp rather than using a solid milled flip-lock style Rolex style clasp. I just think it's dreadful. So the way I'll describe it is a good head of the piece on a dreadful bracelet with an abhorrent clasp. So lastly, I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet two criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So the respective price point of this watch is €213. Really, to evaluate this piece, one has to look at the quality of the finishing throughout. Mirror polishing to the bezel is outstanding, mirror polishing to the flanks is outstanding, brush satin finishing to the tops of the case has a beautiful lustre, case back is well finished. The head of the piece throughout is good quality. The bracelet is dreadful, as I've detailed. So overall, I would describe this as poor quality, and I would also describe it as poor value. I cannot recommend a €213 watch as being excellent quality and excellent value, despite it having the notable improvements of the PT5000 and blue tinted AR coating with 200 meters, which are all strong specification. The bracelet means this piece is poor quality and poor value. I cannot recommend it. And I think if you're looking for an Air King Homage, I highly recommend the 1692, which I personally own. It's a better quality piece and significantly less expensive at €127 versus the €213 of this piece. So I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Pagani Design PD-1723. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.